weird amount of electric vehicle updates. So we're kind of bundling together everything we're hearing about the next-gen Rivian, the R2, and the Lucid Gravity simultaneously. And the good thing that both of these vehicles are supposedly doing is adopting NACS in the best way possible by positioning it in the same position on the vehicle as all other Teslas on the driver's side rear, which allows them to supercharge without an adapter at well over 15,000 different supercharging stalls in the United States and not have to worry about the cable reaching or occupying two spaces like Rivian and Ford vehicles are doing right now. It was very weird though, because Lucid had a little bit of an event where they were letting people check out, the Lucid Air Sapphire and a Gravity pre-production prototype, and people were noticing that this prototype actually had two separate charge ports on it, like one on the front, one on the back. And apparently Peter Rawlinson himself even said that the Gravity has two separate charge ports, both of which are capable of DC fast charging. And for a good 24 hours or so, the whole internet went, oh my god, Lucid is actually going to have two separate charge ports. It's pretty much the first EV to have two separate DC fast charging ports and yet have different connectors on them. So Lucid was like, I am the adapter now. And that's super expensive. So there were a lot of people complaining about that. In case you weren't aware, the high voltage wiring, particularly for the DC fast charging, is incredibly expensive. And that's why most companies, pretty much all EV companies actually, don't want to have two different charge ports on their vehicles. So many people out there have suggested, well, if you're worried about like Adventure Network charging and Tesla supercharging, just have one charge port on the front, one on the back. It adds a ton of money to the wiring cost, which is why most companies don't want to do it. And for a while there, everybody was convinced that Lucid was going to do it on the Gravity because of this one prototype, but actually Lucid's head of communications tweeted out just a few minutes before recording this video that the production Gravity is just going to have one charge port, and the prototypes that have the two charge ports are just doing it for prototyping and testing and validating the battery pack. It's not something they intend to deliver in the production version, so I'm not sure if that's something Peter Rawlinson was aware of or there's just some big miscommunication here. But there was definitely never any official confirmation from Lucid, like through an unveil video or on the website where they indicated that the Gravity would have two different charge ports. It was mainly just like something a couple people took pictures of during this little personal event and something that Peter Rawlinson must have mentioned in passing. But again, there was no video of it, so we don't have the context of how he phrased it, so I won't jump down his throat and say he doesn't know what's going on at the company just yet, because I think there's a decent chance there was just a little bit of misunderstanding. But what I'm glad to see is that most likely they're testing these prototypes to ensure that the charge port will reach at all charging locations, and I'm thankful to see that NACS will most likely be in the same place that it is on Teslas today. And based on conversations that Chris Hilbert and Rivian Tracker have had with Rivian directly, they're all saying that Rivian has made the internal decision to move the charge port on the R2 from, in my opinion, the worst position you could have it, the passenger side rear, which, is basically as far as it could possibly be from the driver, which is like the one occupant is always going to be there, and most people are charging from home anyway. So I really didn't like the idea of R2 passengers having to park their car, get out, go all the way to the furthest part of the vehicle, and then plug it in, and then have to go all the way around the other end of the vehicle, or have to hop over the cable after they've plugged it in. The counter argument a lot of people had for that charging position was curbside charging, but in my opinion, that's more of a hypothetical thing. There's not a ton of curbside charging today. The vast majority of charging is done at home, in a garage, or in people's driveways, and at DC fast charging locations. And of course, all the Tesla superchargers that they're probably going to be using the most have a cable length and a cable position that is optimized for the driver's side rear. So basically, if Rivian left the charge port where it was on the R2 prototype, it was going to have to occupy two stalls at most DC fast charging stations. I understand that there may be some curbside charging that is now more difficult or forces you to be kind of closer to traffic, but in my opinion, it was the minority. Like if we had a pie chart of where most people are charging their EVs, I think the curbside charging would have been the smallest sliver compared to charging in a garage versus DC charging at a supercharger. So pretty much no matter where you put it, there's some compromise, there's some use case that you're going to make worse, and I think that moving it to the driver's side rear has the least amount of compromises. There's still some downsides, but I think it's the least applicable downside for the masses. But one other downside that Chris Hilbert just dropped that actually kind of annoys me. He literally tweeted this like a minute before I hit record on this video. He said that the R2 vehicle will not have the front row seats fold completely flat anymore. They'll be adjustable adjustable so you can slide them upwards. And of course, they'll still articulate just like any other vehicle, but that was a feature that I thought was really, really impressive and I was looking forward to. As someone who does a lot of car camping and was a potential future customer for the R2, that was a feature I was really looking forward to, like being able to camp in the back and have those front row seats fold completely flat. That way you can still access the sub trunk and have your mattress in the back. And now he's saying that apparently it just became too difficult to build that into the front row seats, especially with the steering wheel in the way and everything. But I am even more concerned now that they're not going to have that feature on the R3, which was the Rivian I was far more interested in as a fan of smaller vehicles and more compact vehicles, more efficient vehicles. I really hope that they can still somehow find a way to have the front row seats fold flat in the R3, but here's hoping he's wrong or Rivian hears about the backlash and decides to change their mind. But overall, I'm very thankful to hear that Lucid and Rivian are considering putting the charge port when they adopt NACS in the proper location. I think that charging is one of the biggest hurdles with the adoption of electric vehicles, and for a lot of people, you know, it's not acceptable, the CCS infrastructure we have with Electrify America. I'm still seeing tweets and stories all the time of people who just bought their first EV. They didn't want a Tesla because it was just, you know, too minimal or too cheap. They wanted something fancier and nice, so they buy a Rivian, and then they go out and they have a terrible experience at an Electrify America station. It's hard to activate the charger, it's confusing, it takes minutes just to download the app and set everything up, and then you get a D-rated charge and it's not charging as fast as it's supposed to, and literally people will sell their vehicle after that. I just saw on Facebook Marketplace a few minutes ago someone that had a Generation 2 Rivian R1S, like brand new from the factory, with all of its great new and enhanced camera features and faster infotainment and all the improvements with the suspension they made in that Gen 2 Rivian, and he only drove a couple hundred miles on it and said, we want to sell this, we want to go back to a gas car, mainly because of the charging infrastructure. Like, that was enough to be a deal breaker for a lot of people's car purchases out there. So I think it's desperately needed for the electrification transition that we really, really iron out this charging system so that everybody can pull into any charger and not have to worry about the length of the cable, whether or not they have the right port on their vehicle. And ultimately, I know this sounds tricky and difficult and a lot of people doubt me, but I do genuinely think long term the future is plug and charge functionality. That's the only way we can get everybody on board with EVs, is that charging has to become as simple, or honestly more simple, than a gas pump. And we need to be able to just pull into these stations, you grab the cable, you plug in, and it starts charging, and that's it. Fundamentally, I understand it's a very big engineering challenge because there's so many different vehicles on the market. They want to put the charge ports in different places. And of course, Tesla, when they were building out their V3 supercharger network, was not planning to offer supercharging to all these other EVs, so they built the cables a lot shorter, which saves on money. A lot of people think the solution for future chargers is, well, just put longer cables everywhere, but that's the most expensive part of the charging dispenser. That's why Tesla was able to build out a charging network so much larger and so much more reliable than anybody else, because they knew where to cut costs and they knew how to save money, and that's by building a bunch of superchargers, oftentimes right in a line at the end of the parking lot. They can't lay them out the same way as a gas station because that takes up more parking lot square footage, that costs more money, and you can't put as many dispensers in the same place as you can when you put them all in a straight line at the side of a parking lot, which is why if you adopt NACS on your EV, it should be required that you put it in a charge port location that ensures that you can charge at every V3 stall while only occupying one space. I don't think you should be able to adopt NACS without also standardizing a charge port location. I know that the new V4 superchargers are a little bit more lax because they have the longer cables, but still, there's well over 15,000 chargers that you're basically going to complicate and confuse users with if you choose to put your charge port in a different location. So I'm all in favor of the charge port either being on the driver's side rear or maybe the passenger side front if you really, really care about having a charge port on the front of the vehicle so it's easier to tow with. Like, personally, I hope Rivian does that with the R1 vehicles because those are their higher range variants, so they're more likely to be used for long distance towing. So I hope that next year when Rivian puts the NACS port on their vehicle, they put it on the passenger side front so that you don't have to unhook your trailer, but you can still pull into a supercharging stall and the cable can reach and you're only occupying one space. But EV towing is always going to be a little bit complicated because of the aero problems, but long term, think about it this way. Even though V4 superchargers have longer cables and that should alleviate a lot of today's charging problems, if in the future we could standardize a charge port location across all EVs, it's going to suddenly become much, much easier to build all kinds of DC fast chargers, AC, level 2 chargers, curbside chargers, because at least everybody could know know exactly where the charge port is going to be relatively, and then there could be more of a standardized cable length, and the dispensers, the cabinets, and everything could be cheaper to build, and we can build more of them a lot faster, which I think is honestly incredibly important for the electrification transition. And I really hope that Lucid has actually done some testing with the Gravity with that rear-mounted charge port for NACS. That's a good sign, but also their vehicles are on a much higher voltage architecture, like 800, 900 volts, which is not optimized for the tens of thousands of superchargers that are already out and installed in the ground. So my hope is that they do something similar to the Cybertruck, where they let you split the battery pack in half so you can have 400 volts optimal, and then you can get peak speeds at superchargers. Because right now, even when Lucid does get access to the supercharger network via an adapter, all of the Lucid Airs on the road today are not equipped to handle the 400 volt architecture that the V3 superchargers are built with. So even with an adapter, you're only going to get about 50 kilowatts with most of these Lucid Airs, which is going to take hours and hours for you to recharge the battery. It's not a good system, and I'm hoping they're addressing that with future generation Lucid Airs. So my guess is the Gravity is going to launch later this year just with one CCS port on the front, just like a regular Lucid Air, and then maybe midway / the end of 2025, they're going to start making the 2026 model year Gravity, and that one will switch to a NACS port on the rear. But I guess I just wonder, like, when you're launching the Gravity so soon and you plan on switching to NACS, can't you just jump on the NACS train now? Like, do you really have to make, you know, CCS versions of the Gravity just for a few months only to switch it over like half a year later? Feels a little wasteful, but hey, Lucid's got so much money pouring in from the Saudis. They just got another big investment. I don't think the Saudis are going to stop pouring money into them anytime soon. They've gotten them this far. I don't see why they would quit now. But either way, here's hoping that the charging infrastructure in a couple of years for all EVs is just going to be a lot more simple and a lot more streamlined. But right now, yeah, it's definitely awkward. What do you guys think of Rivian and Lucid's strategy? Feel free to comment down below your thoughts, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.